the work that I'm doing currently, what this has meant for the venture and the project that I'm working on, and actually what are the experiences. And it's not just a chance for me to kind of talk about exactly what model you should go for or exactly what type of governance structure you should go for, because actually it's a kind of a real reflection on the things that I thought I needed to know, and all the way down to where we are now, what it has emerged, what I actually need to know. So who am I? I'm Immy, and you can see some of my details up there. Feel free to tweet and share and talk about anything that we're talking about today, and also to kind of carry on through Twitter or other means of social media to keep in touch. And for me, this kind of really started on a journey of this quote. There was this feeling in me a few years ago when I was back in my hometown around what is possible, what is it that I could create or we could create that would be of benefit to ourselves, the generation that was growing up in the city, many other graduates like me who'd been pulled out of Birmingham and off to London, and what could we do here? And there was something really exciting with the kind of demographic of the city, that I really felt that this was a place where anything seemed possible. I'm 29 now. I founded TEDx Brum about 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm now currently working on a venture called Impact Hub Birmingham. Unlimited and Locality asked me to do now, and I sort of accepted, and basically what they asked me to work on was, could you talk about governance, could you talk about risk, could you talk about finance, investment, legal structures? These were the things they sort of asked me in the email, and I was kind of, yeah, of course I think these things are super important, but actually what in the weeks that I've been preparing for this, what I've really started to strike me is that the experience of what I've been through and the experience of what's happening is probably much more relevant to this conversation than just an absolute kind of presentation on these are the different types of legal structures you can go for, these are the different types of governance structures you can go for, and kind of just doing it as a textbook sort of experience. So the things I'm going to talk about today are the journey from TEDx Brum to Hub Birmingham, what is Impact Hub Birmingham, how networks and relationships really have, in positive and negative ways, been at the absolute heart of this work, and what are the challenges around that. Raising finance for Impact Hub Birmingham, raising finance for anything I've done really, and a spotlight on crowdfunding, which we've done quite a big crowdfunding campaign recently that went wildly successfly, but actually what were the challenges with that. I'm also going to be talking about taking and managing risk, and the challenges of governance structures, business planning in the 21st century. And like I said, it's not the absolute on what you should do and what you shouldn't do. It's actually a journey for me over the last 8 or 9 years of the things that I wish I'd known, the things I did know, what I should have gone to specialists for, and actually what was very much a journey that I had to learn, experience, and be immersed in myself. So I hope it's going to be useful to you. There's loads of chances to ask questions now and afterwards, and also there's a few polls that I'm going to do in between just to kind of get a feel for what's going on. So that kind of leads me into the first poll, which is just a really simple question. What do you know about Impact Hub? What do you know about Impact Hub Birmingham? I'm going to hand over to Luke, who should make the online poll live now, and you should have a few questions coming up on your screen, just so I can get a bit of an understanding of what you know, what you do know. So it looks like I can see the percentages coming in. It looks like a lot of you have no idea about Impact Hub. Some of you have heard of Impact Hub Birmingham. We're looking at about 3/4 of you have never heard of Impact Hub at all. About 20% of you have heard of Impact Hub Birmingham. About 5% of you have heard of Impact Hub, and a handful of you, around 2 or 3%, have visited an Impact Hub. Well, given that kind of statistic, I think it's perfect for me to go on to the next bit of the presentation, which does give a bit of an overview about the Impact Hub and what Impact Hub Birmingham is. So there's about 75% of you who've never heard of it before. So just a quick kind of overview. The Impact Hub Global Network is a network that has been building for the last 10 or 12 years. It started off in Islington in London with a group of founders who wanted to create a space where multiple different interests could come together and start to look at collaborating around making positive social and environmental change in the city and in the world. And from the kind of first ever seeds of a hub in Islington, it rapidly grew over the last 11 years to nearly 70 spaces around the world. About 5 years ago, it became a global association, which means that all of the hubs are a member of the association. They collectively own the association, but every single hub around the world is individually owned. It has its own business structure, whether that's a CIC or a company limited by guarantee or a B Corp, and is owned by its own founders, but we all are connected into a global network. Now, all of the spaces have a few things in common. They are groups and communities of people who are working towards positive social and environmental change, from Oakland in America to Sydney, Singapore, and a whole host of new hubs coming up in African countries, from Oaxaca to London to Birmingham. There are hubs in all sorts of different cities, and each hub really reflects its local area. It reflects the passions of the founders, the founding community, and the challenges or the kind of opportunities that are in those cities. So what you see here what you will see here in Birmingham could be wildly different to Washington, for example. However, we're all grounded in a kind of the same vision for a more just, positive social and environmental change grown from grassroots communities. So that's a little bit about the global network. Typically, the hubs are spaces where communities convene. There is co-working, there is events, there are programs from business incubators to accelerators to arts and cultural things. And again, like I said, every hub reflects its local reality. So at the top of this picture, you can see Westminster, that is on the corner of Pall Mall, and has got organisations like the Trillion Fund based there. And below, on the right, you can see Oakland, that is in the heart of Oakland, and there's a lot of arts and cultural work, as well as a lot of work around social innovation. It completely depends where you are on what the focus is. So in the UK, there are 5 hubs now. We are the first hub outside of London, and this is where we're currently at. We're at a space, it's an absolute shell, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the long, fabulous journey it took to get here, and what are some of the challenges, what are some of the things we've seen around leaders, governance, risk, and what I think going forward are the most pressing issues around community enterprise. So it's a bit weird doing this webinar because I'm just literally talking at you, so if there's any sort of bit of falls apart or I have a break, it's just because I'm trying to navigate. So right now, at this second, downstairs from where I'm sitting, we have a beta where people are just starting to work and start to design and shape the space so that's kind of where the hub. I'm going to start straight away by just saying, is there any questions? Because I think there would be a lot of questions about the details of the hub that you might have to ask, and if you'd like to, now's the chance. Otherwise, I'll get straight into kind of the meaty topics, and hopefully that will spark off more questions. Any questions, Luke?
Oh, I've not activated my microphone there, so just to remind people, if you want to ask a question, just use the box to the right hand side of your screen. I can see here Sean is asking, how are you funded?
Okay, great. So I'm going to do a whole section on funding in a second, so I think it's probably best for me to just go straight on to that. Any other pressing
yeah, another question that's come in, someone saying that they've heard Impact Hub Birmingham is a platform for purpose, but what does that actually mean?
We started off with a while back. For us, the hub is far beyond the space. We want to create a fertile foundation and platform for people who are working on purpose-driven initiatives, ventures, businesses, ideas, things that are either adding value or positive or social environmental outcomes to the city around them, to the world around them. So we are not just a community of just freelancers looking for a space to work from. We're really trying to help curate and attract a community who are interested in their work having sort of a positive benefit community. Anything else?
We've got one more question, but before I ask you that, can I just get you to close your webcam down, Immy? There's a few audio issues there, and I think that'll help it a little bit.
Okay, no problem.
I'm going to do the same, so everyone in the audience will still be able to see the slides, but just to help the audio issues, we've just turned off our webcams. So Andrew's asking, you mentioned unlimited, are they linked? And also, is there any links to Big Local?
So there are links to Unlimited, which I'm going to share in the next bit, which is around funding. Currently we don't have any links with Big Local, but again, as you'll see from the presentation, we're in many senses at the beginning of a journey, and have been largely working kind of over the last couple of years to build this idea.
So that's all the questions we've had come in for the moment. We will be pausing again, so if you do have any questions, ask them in the box and I shall feed them back, but for now I'll hand back to you, Immy.
Fantastic. So I'm going to move on to the next section, which really looks at the things that Unlimited and Locality have asked me to look at, which includes funding, governance, legal structures. And again, like I said, this is a much more experiential side from us. As someone who never intended to be setting up her own business or doing this work, it's very much a series of experiences that have brought us to here. So in terms of funding, I'm going to go on to that first to basically talk about how this happened. So around 6 years ago, I found myself back in Birmingham, feeling sort of a little lost, and wanting to sort of feel part of a community that was the sort of things that I was interested in. And for me, having come from an international development background, having worked for a big charity, I was really interested in how people, citizens, organisations could come together to have impact in the city. That's what I really cared about. I'd fallen out of love with the big global international development kind of rhetoric for me. I didn't feel it worked, but I felt that it had a real link to locally what I was seeing in my own city. So really simply, around 6 years ago, a few of us set up a TEDx event. We started to have events where we could get real voices of citizens doing interesting things in Birmingham, and we started to create a community around that, whether it was the arts or business or health. We were just bringing together people that had something to say, and where you kind of unusual suspects, not the people that you see on the stages every single day. And from that day, from the first event where there was sort of 10 people in the team, 100 people on the day, all the way to the latest TEDx where there was 50 people in the team and 400 and a few thousand watched online, at the heart of it has always been a very deep commitment just to the ordinary relationships between the team and the people who were coming to the events, and kind of this growing relationship that we had with the city. And at this time, I hadn't at all really thought where this would lead. This was a small hobby on the side of, well, a rather large hobby. It was nearly like a full-time job. But we'd ended up investing quite a lot of our own money to make it happen. And really at the heart of it was just these human relationships. At the end of the second year of TEDx, we started to get lots of the same questions from the community, from the people who are attending the events. This is fantastic, but what happens next? These people are great. They're new people that I haven't met before. It's starting to foster collaborations that I hadn't thought of before. We want to do this locally, and we've decided we could work together. Where can we do this? What can we do next? And I was finding increasingly that capacity from my own end, capacity from the team, it's not an event where you can make money to even keep it going. In that sense, you have to just break even. We were piling a fair bit of money ourselves into keeping it going, and lots of interesting things were emerging. And I really started to think, okay, is what we're doing a good thing here? We're putting a lot of money into just convening this once a year, and we're sort of putting ourselves under a lot of pressure. But actually what we're doing is giving people a spark of ideas and then not really having anything to carry on. I got to a point where I was quite happy with the fact that TEDx was always going to be the place that surfaced ideas. People was an inspirational day. It was a way to give a platform to those whose voices are traditionally not as heard in the city. And so that was really great. And at this time, I bumped into a founder of Impact Hub. And that's where I really started to think, okay, how does physical space, how does built community, how does business, how does sustainability really feed into this thing that we were starting to build? So skip forward a couple of years, and I need to do that, otherwise we literally will never get to the point. We decided that Impact Hub Birmingham was what we wanted to go to, and what would be really good, a physical space that could manifest the spirit of TEDx, but actually could start to be a place where we were actually physically looking at how the city, how this work could improve the city, how it could improve the experiences of all these people who were saying we're really enjoying being part of this network. And for about nearly 2 years now, we've been pretty much putting everything in from ourselves, our own money, a founding team of 5 of us, a maker team of nearly 20 who just had jobs and were doing one job to support this idea to go. We have had highs and lows of finding spaces, losing spaces, spending a lot of money, having a few pennies left in my bank account, all the way to recently, when we've just now really started to make traction. We found a new space. We found a space that we could, that we kind of fell in love with, and we decided that we're finding it quite tough actually to find ways to fund this idea that people hadn't seen, to fund a team that people hadn't seen work together before. There was a lot of risk in helping us to get this going. And about 6 months ago, this is where Unlimited became involved. I was nearly at the end of my tether and the last pennies that I had to really push this forward, and I bumped into somebody from Unlimited who said, you know, you can apply for a small award that will just keep you going for a few months. And you can use cash to basically pay for the few things like legal structures, lawyers, things that you need to take this forward and hopefully turn the corner. And it really was a lifeline for me, because until this date we hadn't had a penny from anyone. We had largely been investing in this ourselves, having jobs to kind of manage this to keep it going. And whilst I think 90% of that journey was crucial to this, actually if we'd been heavily funded or been funded to follow an idea, I don't think we would have got the magic that we've managed to kind of pursue. Having said that, the actual personal impact on putting that much time and money over 4 or 5 years was really starting to have an effect on me. So I was lucky to receive a Build It award from Unlimited, which helped to contribute to some of the big costs of taking on a building, gave me a lot of advice, but it was nowhere near the kind of money that we needed to keep this going. So we managed to secure the building with that small fund. We managed to get a lawyer, we managed to draw together a private loan that would mean that we could put a rent deposit down. And then we came to a point where we thought, what's next? People were interested. People were interested in the idea of the hub, people were interested in what we've done, but there wasn't that rush to say, we'll support you to do this. We were feeling quite isolated and it looked like, would we really be able to do this? And that's when we decided, I think this is the time to go to crowdfunding. And this is really over 5 years of relationship building, people that we've met, people who had supported us, people who had said, this is a really good idea. And now we had to bite the bullet, we had to take the risk. Would people support us? Would this really be something that people would fund? Would people help us to get this idea to reality? We'd looked at models all around the world of people who had funded for spaces, for products, for visions, for ideas, for comics. We'd looked at what they'd done, how they'd done it, and we spent a fair bit of time planning out a Kickstarter campaign. And there's almost a whole presentation and webinar on crowdfunding, and I would happily do another one on this, but I'm going to have to zoom through it pretty quickly. We managed to get a 20-person team nearly to donate everything from graphic design to filming, and we created a campaign that basically, this is what happened. We knew that we need £50,000 fit out 6,000 square foot of space, and we knew that we needed it quickly, and we knew that we needed to draw on the crowd because we didn't think traditional funding pots would believe in such an early stage idea at the moment. And as you can see from the first few days, it was nerve-wracking. We had no idea what was going to happen. We had no idea how people would fund us, what would happen, and all the tricks in the book that people would tell you about crowdfunding. Make sure you have a few big donations in, make sure you have a few big things lined up before you go live. We didn't have any of them. And we had to really, really believe in the integrity of the last 4 or 5 years, that this was an idea that people wanted. And also this would show us, is this an idea that people wanted? Because if we weren't funded, if we didn't get there, maybe there was something inherently wrong with what we were trying to do. And as you can see, it flew. It flew. There was different points. We also did it over Christmas, which was a ridiculous idea. But actually, it catapulted. It went from strength to strength. We ended up with 586 backers and £65,000. So we were over 100% funded. In fact, about 130%. And it was 45 of the most difficult days of my entire life. The exposure, the kind of being out there, the worry of getting to this point, the intense 20 hours a day of work and pushing and asking and having meetings to talk to people was intense. It's taken me a fair bit of time to get over it, and I would love actually to talk about this more in a webinar again. So what happened was we managed to get £65,000, which was the core funding we needed to fit such a big space out. And this catapulted. Once people, once funders, once businesses, once local government, lots of people had seen what was happening, suddenly we were having this influx of interest in the project that we hadn't had from the traditional parties before, which was really interesting for us. So at the end of kind of December, early January, we now had a community of 600, also a community from TEDx of around 1,000 people who were really backing and supporting this idea. And for us, at the heart of the Kickstarter, and I still say this now, the amount of work we put into the Kickstarter and what that really breaks down into how much it would have cost if those voluntary hours hadn't been donated. It wasn't easy money. It was the toughest money that I've ever worked for. But I think what was at the heart of it was the strength of the community that we were building, the fact that many were putting a few pounds in to backing the idea rather than needing a single funder or a single entity to give a lot. And that, I'd say, was the real magic of the Kickstarter for us. It's a whole topic. I've got so much to say about it, but I'm not going to sort of bore you with that now because I need to get on to the other things that Locality would like me to talk about today. And so this kind of leads me on quite easily and quickly into risk and what this means for me, and what I think is relevant about it, and what I personally, like I said, it's not the be all and end all what I have to say today. It's my personal experience, how I think risk really comes into it. So there are all the things that you can kind of think about very logically around technical risk. I had to take on a £50,000 loan between the founders to secure a building because we were, even though we had a strong idea, we were too young, we were too new, we hadn't worked together enough before for people to take that risk on us. So we had to take quite a big, financial risk on our own lives. We had to secure a loan to get into the building and really even start to explore this idea, which was really interesting because it really changed the game for us as a founding team, and we had to financially take a risk on this. None of us had big savings, none of us had parents who could support us. We had to find a way to really to do this, and luckily we found somebody who gave us a private loan, said, yeah, I'll do this for a year to see if you can make it work. And it's scary, and it absolutely is still scary. I wake up in the middle of the night shaking sometimes with the amount of risk we've kind of taken on. But I'd known after 2 or 3 years of the amount of talk we'd had around this, that this was something that at some point, someone somewhere was going to have to take the risk to take this forward. Otherwise, we would never get from an idea to a reality. So yes, there's a technical risk. There's a technical risks of finances, of taking on a 5-year lease on a building. There's technical risk of signing up to be a director of a company with people who are great friends of mine, but I've never worked with them to this kind of extent before. Those things are all there, and I think people talk about risk in a lot of different ways, and we largely focus around technical risks when we talk about that. But for me, the real risks, and the real risks that I feel that aren't talked about much, and even if they are, they're kind of ad hoc, but for me these have been the real issues. What about the risks to your sort of life opportunities? As a founder of a business that immerses you, you are living and breathing it 24/7. What life opportunities are you giving up? Every time I spend sort of 12, 15, 20 hours a day working on this stuff, what are all the things that I'm giving up? Not as a martyr, but actually, what is the support network for that? How can we be more understanding of the networks that we need to help people to manage all of this uncertainty, manage the problems that come with this, as an idea that has really gained its strength from being very open, very highly networked. How do you deal with the exposure of that? So I constantly find myself very exposed. I constantly find myself at the attack of people who maybe don't understand the idea, or having to explain what we're doing. And often people think that we are heavily funded and we're funded by government bodies and all sorts, and actually that constant exposure to needing to explain myself as a team, the constant exposure to having to look after a huge, big team, and sort of make sure everyone's okay and keep this going, because we've all been volunteering for 2 years, financials are really tight, and what's the isolation of that? So there's a real magic of these open, highly networked businesses. It's really the strength of where we've got to right now has been the fact that lots of people know us, lots of people have backed us, but also what does that mean when you are so known? What is the reputational risk? As a fairly young person, if I was to mess this up, what effect would that have on my reputation? And if I even do have one, and when you're painting such a good picture of how it's all going, and you're keeping this lens of positivity and hope going, when the reality of it is fantastic, but some of it is a very lonely, isolating place, how do you manage that uncertainty? And so these are the real questions that I'm asking around risk. We all know very, very clearly about the technical risks you take. There's a lot of support out there for all of that. But as we see an increase in self-employed people, as we see an increase in people starting their own ventures, a real push from all angles for people to start their own enterprises and really go into business, how are we looking at those that do throw everything in, and what are also the weaknesses of social media, of crowdfunding, of the amount of personal risks and exposure that people take when they're setting something up. So it was one of the reasons why, when I say that at the heart of everything we're doing is that real human relationship, that's what I really want to look at the Hub. What a kind of trust and support networks are we creating for those that are taking these risks for everything that they believe in? And there are many that come before us and many that go ahead, but I think we're at a really exciting time at the moment where people are more open with talking about the issues around mental health and isolation, and people are starting to slowly talk more openly about these things, and I think they're hugely relevant when we talk about the risk of enterprise. So whilst today Locality and Unlimited asked me to talk about risk, I can talk, like I said before, about the technical risks, but what I'm really interested in is how do you manage the uncertainties of all of these different things at once. And hopefully some of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit more will kind of explain why I'm so passionate about this. So I've got another question. There's an online poll that I think Luke will sort of get going for me now, which has got another question around early stage entrepreneurship. What are the gaps? What do you think are the real issues? Luke, if you could just activate that. And the reason why I ask this is because there's a lot of fantastic things about being in the position that we're in, but actually we've seen a lot of gaps. And I was just wondering from the audience, do you see, are there any gaps? What are the things that you struggle with? I've given a few things that I think, they're not at all exhaustive, but, is raising finance something that you feel really struck with, how important are the examples of real experience? You might get to the end of today and say, Immy, this was a waste of time, this wasn't useful to me at all. Are real experience examples there enough? Is there enough open conversation? Another option I've given is this community of support. What is it like for a lot of people who are trying to find new ideas? What is the daily practice of that? I've gained a lot of strength from being around a lot of people doing the same or similar things to me. And also, how relevant do you think the emotional and personal experience on founding teams is relevant to all of this? And you might just say there's no gaps. There's a lot of support out there for early stage entrepreneurs. I don't really see the problem. What are you talking about, Immy? So yeah, we're getting quite a mixed bag. I'm not sure how the online poll works. I don't know whether you can choose more than one option. Some of you might find that you kind of would want to click on more than one option. What I'd recommend is in the questions, the Q&As, to just bring up some of the things. I'm happy for this to be a conversation around the issues that you guys see. Okay, so I'm just going to give about a minute more because we're at sort of 69% voted now, so there's a few more, maybe 10, 15 of you left to vote. So at the moment, leading the top of the poll is raising finance generally. 20% of you are saying that examples of real experience aren't around as much as they could do with. And surprisingly, a quarter of you, I wasn't sure whether this was something that I was just bringing up or whether it was really there. Quite a few of you said the emotional and personal experience of it is quite tough. So a couple of seconds more if we'll ask people to vote, otherwise I think we'll close the poll. Okay, well, so I've just put in a little link there, and these slides will all be available to everybody, where you can just have a look a little bit into a report that Nesta did around some of the challenges for early stage businesses, and some of the things that I think we picked up ourselves during what we're doing, and also things that we want to sort of look at in the future in the hub. So chance for you to ask your questions now again, and I'm happy to respond and fill some of the gaps because I know we're flying through. It's only an hour and I've got a lot of topics to cover.
So we've got a few questions come in here. Immy, a couple are similar. Let me just have a look here. So there's a few people who are saying, does a Impact Hub work best in city centre locations, or do you think it could also work in rural areas as well?
So I think that's a really great question, and I know that that's a question that the global network have been challenging and thinking about over many years. To date, most of the hubs, the majority of the hubs that have worked or have been founded have been in the first cities of many countries, so your New Yorks, your Londons, your kind of big cities, Sydneys. But over the last couple of years, we've started to see a change. So, for example, Birmingham is one of the first outside of the capital. There are others around the world. The new Impact Hub Africa initiative is looking at African countries that are going to be setting up hubs in their local realities. So what I would say is right now, in the core business model that we're working on, it probably works a bit better and more successfully in a big city. However, having said that, I think there's a lot of work to do around looking at how we can transfer the model and elements of the model to more rural areas. For example, maybe having hub and spoke satellite hubs that can link into areas that have more local context there. So I would say the next few years this is going to be the real challenge. How can local areas really pick up on what's happening in the cities, but also not just replicate what's happening in the cities, what are those rural needs? And I'd love to kind of pick up that conversation because it's something that I really want to explore over the coming years.
There's also a question here around financing. So the comment is there are very few dedicated finance and support platforms catering for young social entrepreneurs. What do you believe the core reason behind this is?
So I don't think I have a clear answer to what the core reason for that is at the moment. What I think from our personal experience that we're finding is that we found it very hard to navigate the funding landscape. We find it very hard to navigate how our vision matched in with often what funders wanted. So we weren't often sure how to match these two things up, because often we'd find a fund that was really hard to get to, but it didn't really match our visions. And at the same time, we were sort of looking at new models, but actually not understanding how we could connect the right things up. So it took us quite a few years to get to where we're at. I personally am not sure why the gap is there, and that's really why we're doing the work that we are. At the Hub, we want to try and create a place where it's much easier to navigate this. And on a side note, I'd say that given my experience, even though it's nearly broken us financially and taken a long time to get here, that what we really needed to focus on was our idea. And after the idea was solid, excuse me, after the idea and the vision was solid, it was much easier to start looking at what finance streams we could go for. So I'd say there's almost a gap in helping people to really get to the core of what they want to achieve, and actually the funds that they need to do that. Sorry. 1 second.
Then I've got one final question here from Sean. Could you give some brief details on how you plan to make it sustainable?
Yeah, so currently, sorry, I've got a bit of a cough, so if I just go off for a few seconds, it's just because I'm coughing my guts out. Yeah, the plan, at the heart of it, was always really important to us to not be dependent on grant funding. We were happy to explore different funds, etc. in the future if they supported us to do programs or support scholarships, but we wanted to make a sustainable core business so that we as a founding group knew that the idea worked and that we would never kind of come under the fire of funding being cut and suddenly us abandoning 100 or 200 members who were signed up to the Hub, and more largely the whole community and network that supported us. So our core business model at the moment is around co-working and events at the Hub. So there'll be a number of members who use the space as their office. It's a shared infrastructure. It will be there for businesses to use as their office space, but also individuals who can't quite afford an office space but want to share the infrastructure of high quality Wi-Fi, of the community, of having desk space, of having access to resources and support for their business, and also having revenue from events, so having space where we curate and we invite people in, and also people can hire the space for events, largely around any events that are to do with positive social or environmental outcomes and issues, or things that are of a positive benefit to the city. And so that's how we run our core business model. We are looking in the future to really be able to flip this on its head, because I don't believe that just getting people to pay to be a member here is the only way that this can work. But what we wanted to make sure we did was have a sustainable model that paid for itself and looked after itself before we started to look more widely. And that's really from my experience in having worked previously in the charitable sector and other organisations that were heavily grant funded and reliant on that, and how things changed when that wasn't available. So this is again not a piece of advice about grant funding. It's my personal experience as to why we chose to go this way and why a sustainable business model was key to the centre of this.
I'm going to draw this Q&A session to a close now and hand back to you for the next part of the presentation, Immy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Luke. So again, just a clause around this bit isn't really going to be just a list of ways you can govern your organisation. I think it's more to do with the experience of this for me. I think there's a whole load of resources out there, from if you go to Unlimited, if you go to other people who have got tons of resources about why this is really important and why having good governance in your organisation is key really to many different things, from the success of your organisation, from the longevity of it, from the way that decisions are made more fairly and with more transparency. However, I think for me the experiences around this have been not just about technical technical governance. It's not just about whether you've got a financial control procedure, whether you've got a set of rules that you go by when you're making a decision, whether your procurement strategy or your way that you purchase things is clear. I think these things are very important. I think the way that you manage and look after those that you work with or work with you are crucial. However, it's some of the experiences that I want to talk about that have been much more key to us has been really around the cultural governance of this. We have been a very open, widely networked organisation. We have had, for the last 2 years, it's really been open in terms of who wanted to come and join the process, who wanted to be part of the team, who wanted to come and shape the hub. How did I manage ownership of this space? So who was going to actually take the financial risk? Who was going to take the risk of actually setting this up and being a director of this? And how are we going to keep it open so people could always come in? So at the moment, like I've shown, we've got a huge community. We've also got a volunteer team of 20 who have given, I'd say, in kind, about £100,000 worth of time over the years. And how do you manage that? How do you look after the complexities of setting up a CIC, having directors, equity? How do you give that out? How do you then manage a broad team of more than 20 people who are giving into something that is not certain yet? They're giving into an idea. They're giving everything they've got into an idea. And at some point, you've got to be able to prove the value of that. You've got to be able to have a thing that they can latch onto and a reason why, because generosity will always be there, but actually it soon weans dry. People can't just keep giving. And how do you look after that? So what I've been really struggling or battling or learning or working together with the team and wider is around this cultural governance. If we talk about the hub being a place where the future of childcare can be different, where a mother doesn't have to take as many tough choices as she does if she's restrictive and not flexible childcare. Actually, how do you manage that when one of your team does want to go off and have a family? And the reality is, as a small organisation, it's going to break you for that to happen. And how do you look after? How do you hold the nerve? So there's 5 co-founders at Impact Hub Birmingham, and there's a volunteer team of 20. But actually, we've been working together for a number of years, and it's taken time for different people to find where they fit, different people to have the confidence to step forward and really take ownership of this. And how, even though I was driving this idea, how do I keep enough control to keep things going, to keep the hope there, to keep people driving towards this, while at the same time encouraging people to step up and really take ownership over this idea. So one of the things that I'd say is that the challenges in setting up a new enterprise around governance aren't necessarily going to be around having enough information out there of how to set up a really great financial control procedure, how to have a really great set of governance procedures that mean that your organisation is well run. In open and highly networked businesses, governance is going to be key. It's going to be absolutely key as to whether you survive the long term. There needs to be robust systems in place. But the challenges are way beyond that. The challenges of the everyday integrity of the relationships, of how you manage the complexity and the uncertainty of this work, and those are going to be the things that really ensure that you don't have a bomb go off in your team, because there's been a number of disasters over the last 2 years that we've navigated because of that. So again, just a provocation on what I really think when we're thinking about governance, what we need to be thinking about is more the everyday realities of this and the challenges that founders have trying to navigate that, rather than just find booklets on the information of how to set up great governance in a team. Those are the challenges that I've had. And going on to legal structures, so I've linked in, when you receive this presentation, you'll see a link of lots of different legal structures, even some webinars where people go through and tell you every different type of business model, how it works. So for us, we're a CIC, we're limited by shares, we've got 5 co-founders who equally own the business, and the challenge again in legal structure for me was not about finding the right amount of information about how to set that up. I really recommend when you do set up your organisation in whatever form you choose to do so, is to get some support and advice on that. So we got a chartered accountant to help us make sure everything was set out really properly. These things were invaluable, absolutely invaluable, when setting up, whether deciding it was just going to be a company limited by guarantee or whether we wanted to make sure that we were CRC from day one, why this was important, why having robust articles and ensuring that our community interest to the city and to what we defined that to be was crucial, and we spent a lot of time working on this. We were really lucky to have some support from our Unlimited award manager. We were lucky to have support from others who had set up hubs. We got a chartered accountant to help us go through it all. It cost us a little bit more than doing it ourselves, but I would say doing that properly was crucial. And if I could go back, I would have done it a lot earlier. I would have constituted us a lot earlier. I would have worked on this much earlier and made sure that I did it with a number of people rather than trying to navigate it by myself, because once I'd got Unlimited involved, once I had an accountant that helped us set up and really helped us make sure we got all the details right, things were a lot easier. But again, like I said, I don't just want to tell sort of textbook stuff. The real issues with legal structure came for me with equity. How do you give out equity? When do you take that choice? Do you wait for people to prove themselves and stick around? So this idea for me, I've been working on for 5 or 6 years. I'd put probably 10, 15, 20,000 pounds of my own money into things like TEDx, into starting the idea, into paying for coffee meets, of doing all the details that it would take to get here. And then I had this team around me, and some people were telling me, you shouldn't give out equity too soon because people can just run off with all the work that you've done. Other people were saying equity really gives ownership. You need to do it. And how do you do that? How do you decide that? So for us, we didn't constitute until nearly a year after we'd all been working together. The deciding who the founders were going to be and how that was going to work was a long series of conversations. But really, the conversations were more around the everyday relational stuff, the trust we had in the system, not the sort of questions that were like, you know, do you want to start a business? How much money do you want to make out of it? How long are you going to stick around for? These were part of the conversation, but the real conversation for me is, why are we doing this? Where do we all want to end up? Who wants to be part of this? Who wants to be, not everybody wants to be part of it. There's a lot of risk in setting up your own organisation. And therefore, this was really important for us. Sorry. The next bit came for when and how. When did I feel confident enough? Sorry, 1 second. When did I feel confident enough to give away the equity? And what happened? And actually, what I say is that it changed everything. The minute that I had 4 or 5 people that also own this business, that had also taken the risk, we forged forward like you wouldn't believe. There had to be a lot of trust. There had to be a lot of kind of us trusting each other, trusting why we were doing this. But actually, it did change everything. And what actually became the issues with legal structure wasn't about me understanding what equity I'd given, trusting whether people were doing their jobs or whether they were treating this thing that I'd started up well. The real questions and the real challenges came basically becoming a hope machine. So I got people to commit to something that we couldn't yet see what was coming. We didn't have a space. We didn't have any money. We didn't have the crowdfunder. We had gone through lots of things that had we tried to collaborate with organisations and people and they'd fallen apart, and we had a lot of challenges. And actually I'd got people to commit their lives and their finances to something. And what actually happened was I had to become the person that held this together until the value did emerge, to keep showing examples of what we could do, what we could achieve, where we could get to, and really keep that going. and make that the basis of why we were working together, not because we were all directors of a company at company's house. However, again, do not underestimate how much giving ownership to those you trust, physical, real ownership, a stake, a bit of this thing that they're building, can really change the game, because the magic for us came when I did that. We secured a building, we secured the finances, we forged forward, we built a volunteer team that could see that the founders were giving everything financially and mentally and physically to this idea. And once we'd taken all of the kind of other things out of the picture and we'd focus on that at the heart of our legal structure, everything else was easy. It doesn't matter how many people you have signed into your company as a director. If you haven't got all these other things in place, it's never, for me, I don't think was going to go from strength to strength. And I've put another example here around a link that you might want to read about actually how much having that openness and that transparency in what we were doing, in how much money we had, in who owned the business, why I think it's really important, why I think it's really important for the future. I can't stress enough how much giving equity away, giving ownership away changed everything for us at the Hub. And that is something I'd love to talk more about in the future. And then actually when you're doing that, there's plenty of specialists you can go to for legal structures. What you really need to get through it is experience. And I was lucky to have so many mentors that were coming around and explaining and helping me navigate the everyday difficulties of having a team this big, and the real difficulties weren't around constituting the CIC. The real difficulties were thinking about equity, thinking about ownership, thinking about what that meant for the Hub. And just moving on again with business planning, another thing that Unlimited and Locality asked me to talk about. Let me start by saying we have a business plan. We have a business plan that is 25 pages long, I think. We also have a financial forecast for the next 5 years. We have a feasibility study that we've been working on for a year now. That is, these things are, probably total to 100, 150 pages worth of information, and they were very important to do. They were very, very important for us to work through, to make sure that we got right, that our finances stacked up, that we knew what we were getting into, and that we had a business plan so we knew where we were heading. Because the second we took on the space, every day became about whether there was toilet roll in the toilets, or why the intercom wasn't working, or the door was a bit rusty. And actually, you need your core vision and your business plan to keep you going to where you originally started to do this for. But actually, I think the real challenge of business planning in the era that we're currently in is being able to have a core business plan, but to be able to iterate around it, to be able to evolve your business planning day to day, to look at what you've decided as your core structure, and to be able to say, okay, we need to do this, to manage the opportunities, to say no to opportunities because actually they don't fit in with your vision. But sometimes when an opportunity comes by that's so good, how do you go and pursue something without moving so far away from your original plan that you completely lose structure? And super high communication between our team, with our advisors, with people that we work with is the way I manage this. But actually, I think this is crucial. When this, a lot of people say, well, a business plan is a waste of time because you never stick to it. I don't think that's the case. I think it's really crucial to ground yourself with why you're doing what you're doing, and to ensure that the finances and the vision all sort of meet together. However, the crucial thing is can you deviate? Can you deviate effectively? Can you navigate new things when you're constantly surrounded by ideas, discussions, people, new energies, and new things are emerging? How do you create an open and iterative process that means your business plan can constantly evolve, but you're always still heading to the big vision that you've done? So that's why for us, setting a very big, bold vision was crucial, because actually what we wanted to do was always have something where we were focused. We wanted to be grounded in good business practice, but we wanted to be creative. We wanted to be able to be open, to move from an idea, to be able to iterate. And I think this is really important. Again, we also designed this with the community, with the network. What do people want from us? So when after the end of the Kickstarter, we had 600 people back us, and about 20 were in the space, and we asked the question, why did you become a member? And not one of the people those 20 people said to us they became a member because of the space. They all said they became a member because they wanted access to this network. They wanted to be around other people doing similar things to them because they were feeling isolated, because they wanted to be around that. That was really interesting for me, because after 2 years of a business plan that was largely based on space, we've already started to think about, actually, it isn't the space that people are interested in. People are using the space as a way to justify becoming a member, but they're really interested in the network. They're interested in the opportunities. They're interested in the other things that are around there. So for us, it's been a real sort of look back at the business plan. How can we grow from this? So I'd say be open. Keep the ethos of the team that you're always going to iterate around your core business planning, because you're going to need to, and things are going to change. When people are involved, it's always going to be that way. So for us, we really placed at the heart of it listening to whoever we classed as our customer. And for us, that's two people, two things. It's our members, but it's also the city. The city is the customer. Whatever the city needs or wants or is questioning us on, we need to be able to push and change what we're doing around that. So when you are doing a business plan, make it robust so that the numbers stack up, so that funders or people can look at what you're doing and say, yes, these guys really know what they're doing. But stay open, stay iterative, and make sure that you can keep changing and evolving what you're doing. So an online poll, again, I'm just going to hand over to Luke. Really simple question. Do you think examples based on experience are helpful? Or actually, are you looking more for just the textbook stuff? Do you not find that easy to, on legals, governance and other things? Are you looking for nuts and bolts, or do you need more experience, or do you need both? So we're about 50% voted, probably about 30 more seconds, and then we'll close the poll. So the reason why I'm asking this question is not so much, yes, it's around understanding whether what I'm talking about today is useful, but it's also, you guys really helping us at the Hub to understand what it is that people want, because so far to date we've heard, I can get the nuts and bolts very easily, it's everywhere, but what I really need is more examples of stories, of examples. When I tell the story of us losing our previous space, us not going for grant funding straight away, of us not doing, of the challenges from early stage entrepreneurships, and what that really means for people. People actually say that the experience is much more useful than hearing the nuts and bolts. So I just wanted to understand that, because at the Hub what we're really looking to do is mix these two things together, the nuts and bolts of business and the work that we're doing, mixed with the real experiences of people. Hence why I think physical space is still crucial to this. So just to let you know where we're at, it's about 50% said a bit of both, but actually 41% of you said actually the story behind this is really important. Again, I've put some resources here of some webinars that tell you about all the nuts and bolts too, so there's plenty of places where you can go and find out about that from. And I'm more than happy to talk about the nuts and bolts of Birmingham's governance, legal structure, business plan. I can share it all with you. It's all open from our end. But actually what I want to understand is how much of what I'm going through or what our team is going through is relevant to you all. So do we need to do more of this, or actually it's completely useless and you're all thinking, oh, I wish I wasn't here. So thank you for that. Thanks for letting me know. I just want to open up for some more questions. We're coming to the end, but I've got sort of a couple of minutes. I think we'll probably go over by a couple of minutes.
Yep, so I can see we've had another question come in. This question's from Sally, and Sally's asking, when people are volunteers and they want to take a role but haven't really got the skills but don't recognise their skills gap, how do you handle that?
So for us, that's a really good question, because it hasn't happened through design, I would say, but from our end, we never really advertised for roles of people that we needed. We sort of looked at who was interested and who kept showing up, and then I had to trust implicitly that because these people were really interested and passionately cared about the end goal, that we would surface and find the skills. And so what I spent a lot of my time doing, like I said before, was really just nurturing that, going out for, having suppers and lunches and conversations and intimately understanding why a lot of the people who were volunteering as volunteers were interested. So I never really asked in fact I've never asked what are your skills for the volunteer team. It just kind of include people in on a vision and a journey. And actually what you'll find in a place, and I can't really speak on behalf of the team, but in a place where people feel confident to speak, to get involved, to sometimes just sit back and observe and not have to be actively involved. If you stick at that long enough, if there's enough integrity and enough strength in this community that you're building, those skills will come out. So we found all sorts of incredible things, from nuts and bolts of graphic design, but all the way to horticulture and guerrilla gardening and all sorts that has come out just from the simple fact that what we're trying to build here is a team that's more like a family and more like real relationships, rather than a service offer of, I've got a volunteer opportunity, would you like to come and be involved? Now, like I said, that doesn't work in every single setting, but for us in the sort of community that we're trying to build, what I focus on more is building a family of people who are on a road together, rather than a kind of really rigid structure where I have volunteer opportunities and people come and volunteer for me. This is a team. I always call the hub team sort of a family, and we keep constantly in contact, and we do a lot of very human, normal things that mean that people's confidence slowly grows. But to say that we've been working on it for 18 months, and for some people they've only just found their confidence maybe in the last few months, or people who had previously shied away but in the Kickstarter came to life, what I'd say the key to it is longevity. Think why you need volunteers and how much you're able to stick at the very human relationships that help them to find the confidence in what you're doing and find where they fit. Eventually everybody will find a place. There is never, I don't think there's never a person that hasn't got the skills, but sometimes you just have to find lots of different ways to surface that. Some of it might be conversations about their private life or why they're doing what they're doing. Other times it might just be letting them sit back and observe for ages and just be part of it, part of the fun, part of the going forward, and waiting for the moment where they feel like they can say, hey, this is something I want to be part of. So for me, I don't really force it. I try to look at how parents nurture a good family and how you can create an environment where people can feel that they can take ownership and control and contribute to it.
I hope that answers your question, Sally. And then the next question we've got coming in is from Philippa, and Philippa says, trading arms of charities where a company has a single shareholder which is registered, which is a registered charity, and all profits feed back into the charity. Are they able to access funds?
Wow, okay. I'm going to be really honest with that question and say I'm not sure of the answer, but I definitely know people that could answer that question for you. I don't know a lot because we don't really focus on crowdfunding at all, and therefore I think the best thing to do is if I take your email, I can forward you on to somebody at Unlimited that I know, and I'm sure Luke you can answer that question much better than I can. Sorry about that.
Yep, so we will get back in touch with you, Philippa, and help you with that. But for the moment, Immy, that's all the questions we've had come in, so she'll hand back to you again.
Brilliant. I'm just going to finish off because I know that we've gone over a bit, and I can definitely say that I have not gone into enough detail of lots and lots of things, so please don't feel like this is kind of the be-all and end-all, and please continue to talk to me about what you'd like to. So just to kind of finish off, I was asked to kind of talk about what social impact and what sort of leadership and this kind of thing means to me. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail about it. There are so many more knowledgeable resources on social impact, social value that you can find everywhere, and I've got a few links to connect to that. But what I'd say for us, once we've got the idea of what really made us feel alive and what we really wanted to create at the Hub, we started to really think about where were we heading, what was the vision of what we wanted to do, and actually not make it about funders, not make it about what outcomes other people wanted from us, because I knew that if we just chased what would get us money from different funders, we would lose the real essence of what was making this happen. And sticking to that really helped, because actually it's what made sort of 600 people back us with £65,000. And what we constantly do is speak to the potential members, the community, the customers, look at what's happening in Birmingham, and really build what impact we want to have. So the day that the members had said to us we joined because of the network, we started to really think about actually how do we quantify that. So if people are interested in new jobs, meeting others, how do we start to look at the data points, for example, that means that they can quantify what they paid their money for they were actually getting. And then for us, we set a very big, bold vision of wanting to support and grow and continue to look at this idea of a better, more fair, just Birmingham. And that's huge, but actually what it helped us to do is always make sure we were constantly sort of pushing on that vision. So, I mean, I want to finish off with the reason why I said yes to doing this webinar was because I think there's a bit of a gap, and a gap that I've learned through meeting people in the real experience of this stuff. I think there's a lot of specialists out there, and they are fantastic. They can help you from anything to do with governance, to legal structures, to bank accounts, to accountancy, to all the details that you need to know about. But what I think, and I don't think there's any shortage of that, and Limited are a fantastic example of where you can go and get tons of support. You can even get some seed financing for an idea, and they'll back you as long as they feel that you've really got the integrity to push. They were a lifeline for us. But actually what I think there's a real gap for, and what I'm really hoping to look at more is actually how do you, the real sort of leader of the 21st century, in my opinion, is going to be the person who can mix all this stuff together, the person who can manage the uncertainty, the people who can help to bring together these diverse interests, who can look at how inherently tough collaboration is and what that looks like, a person that can hold the whole of this system together, a person who can understand the technical side of all of what we've talked about, but also the cultural and real relational experience of all of that too. I think the future of kind of leadership and what we really need to be looking at are the people that can be curators of this huge, complex system, and actually no linear response so far has helped us to solve the huge social challenges that we've got. What I think we need to do is look at how these things link together more. And so I would love to see more of this. I'd love to see more of this kind of conversation in lots and lots of different ways to help founders, to help people with ideas, not to just think of their ideas as an enterprise that they're going to go and think of, set up and all the structure around that, but actually the entire complexity of it and the real effect that it has on founders, on the teams, on the risks they take, on the real challenges of entrepreneurship, the mental health of it, the isolation, the exposure. These are the things that I'm really interested in cultivating. How can we create more system leaders who are able to work with other systems and create unlikely collaborations that are going to start to solve the huge challenges? I've linked here to an article that I find absolutely fantastic and something that I've really been reading a lot of. And it's, I'd say, the vulnerability and the future of sort of leadership in the 21st century is going to be about managing this and looking at actually how we can really start to join together all of these incredible things that people are doing all over the place and really make that a tangible and real force for change in our cities. So what I'd say is that there's lots of details. I can forward you to all sorts of things that are resources, from our business plan to our accountants, to our governance structures, to all the things that we've been battling away on getting. But I think where I probably could add more value is that this is really complex. It's a really complex thing to be part of. The challenges that we face are huge. The track record we have at the moment is that we've not done a hugely fantastic job of tackling these huge social ills. But at the same time, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of amazing things happening. There's a lot of incredible people stepping up and taking the risks and putting their money where their mouth is, or putting their life and their effort into the things that they care about. And what we really need to know and what we really need to do is join some of these things together, so a lot of these incredible people can come together and start to look at how we can collectively create incredible change in our cities, in the neighbourhoods around us, and wider than that. But it's really not for me to kind of be saying this is how we can change the world. I really believe that if we focus on some of the things that we talked about today and a lot more, there's a chance to really have a future whereby we start to look together more collectively. Unusual collaborations come together to really solve the big issues that we're facing in our cities. So thank you for listening. I do want to have a chance to have more Q&A, and I don't think we have much more time. But what I do really want to say is, for me, this is the beginning of a conversation. I'm a young founder of an idea that has taken me by storm and keeps me awake at night, and I give everything towards it. I don't have all the answers, but what I do have is lots of experience about what it's taken to get here, and lots of little examples, from crowdfunding to governance to having a building, that I can really share with all of you. So feel free to come by, get in touch anytime, and let's really build this together, and let's build the conversation together.
So I'd like to thank Immy for running such an interesting webinar. I've certainly learned a lot there about Impact Hub Birmingham. Hope everyone that's joined us in the audience has learned a lot too. As I said at the beginning, you will be getting a copy of the slides that you've seen today, so they'll be sent to you shortly. I'd like to let you know before I go that Locality regularly run webinar sessions such as this, so if you've enjoyed this session, please take a look at our website, and if you go to the web address locality.org.uk/events, any more webinars that we are running will be listed on there. So I hope to see you all again soon, and thank you for attending today's session. Hopefully speak to you soon, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye.